Hello, me lovelies. Well, as you can see, this is a video concerning the BBC newsreader Hugh Edwards and his having to answer charges of his being found with very serious, 6 cases actually, of very serious child abuse images. And he had more images, but 6 of them were considered high level, so it's very, very serious what he had on his computer. For those who know, Hugh Edwards was suspended by the BBC on full pay. I think legally they had to do that anyway, when an investigation was going on, over his conduct with a youth and paying this youth to send him pictures of himself. So that was hard to handle, the fact that he'd done this and it was obviously done it, and yet he was still on full pay. Not only was on full pay, he actually got a significant pay rise when he was suspended. But now he's being pulled in over these charges, and the BBC have only just heard about these charges, so they didn't know that this was going to happen. But what's interesting about this is that this is so indicative of the BBC. It looks like this is happening as an isolated bubble, that Hugh Edwards is just a bad apple in the system. Well, we all know about Savile and how the BBC ignored that. And it's not just the BBC. We have to be fair and say, look at other cases that have happened on other networks where people were a danger to children, and those networks totally ignored that fact. Didn't do anything about it until they were forced to do something about it. Now, what gets me about the BBC is that this, and they will start addressing this, that he's just one rogue apple. No, he isn't. I've said this for years, since what I learned at the Merseyside Police. I actually approached the BBC with significant concerns over where I was hearing from officers about BBC Radio Merseyside and concerns over the safety of children there, which the force was not acting on because they were in an agreement. If you listen to BBC Radio Merseyside, they're very 100% pro Merseyside Police. There's a reason for that. They sort of have this man as man and rat agreement. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And so I told the BBC this, and they've still got the evidence of they approached them and the response. And the response was basically told to keep my mouth shut and be careful what I said. They weren't going to look into it. But I'd get in trouble for saying that. I tried to raise the issue over a long period of time with BBC Radio Merseyside, and it was just fobbed off. Because they knew what the truth was themselves. Well, the interesting thing is, it was only a week after I actually raised this with BBC itself, the way I had these concerns and the way BBC Radio Merseyside were just not interested. Well, what they were doing, they were interested in blocking any investigation into it. A man called Mark Roy Norrie was arrested by North Wales Police for historical offences against young boys. Guess who Roy Norrie worked for? BBC Radio Merseyside. Yes, you guessed it. And that's just one person that we know worked there that was of that inclination. I can assure you there's been others. Now, it's a culture, and you've got to remember this. This is a culture within the BBC and within other networks. It's actually something that infiltrates the whole entertainment industry. Now, some people know I grew up from a very young age in the entertainment industry. But I was in like an isolated bubble myself, where when you're training to be a ballet dancer, you're sort of separate from other people. But as you get older, you do start mixing with other artists like actors, singers, musicians, and then you start seeing things. So for the vast majority of my youth and teenage years, I never had a clue that there were any such people that were doing things to children in the entertainment industry. Certainly never, I never saw it. No one ever made advances towards me, and people who I studied with, fellow students, I never seen it happening. But as I got older and started to expand more in the people I knew and started to engage with, I did notice a couple of concerning situations. There was one that always sticks out in my mind. This is the one when I thought, oh, there's no wondering what this means. It was obvious what it meant. And it was an American producer. And we were all sitting around a table at this theatre discussing this show that was coming up that we were all working on. And he started talking about how in his apartment he had, between his bedroom and the living room, was this landing or something. I don't know what it was, but it was a short walkway. And he said he was basically saying, I'm trying to think back now years, so it's difficult for me to get the words exactly right. But what he's more or less saying is that there was a dividing line. If they went over the dividing line, he could have them in his bedroom and do things to them. And I remember I was looking at him and I thought, it's obvious what he's going on about there. And I could see people's faces around the table. Some couldn't have given a damn. They just talked as totally normal, because most probably it was normal hearing things like that to them, because they'd been in that side and seen that side of the entertainment industry. And others were looking like totally disgusted, but didn't say anything. And I was in that position as well. I thought, well, what do you say to that? What the hell do you say to that? Because what it was, we were working in that show with children. Well, not children, youths, young people. And so I collared someone I knew that was working on it as well. And I said, should he be, here hanging around these young people? I said, I'm very disturbed what he just said. And he said, don't worry. He said, don't worry. He said, this is the first time you've seen him here, haven't you? So I said, yeah. He said, I can assure you, you won't see him again here. Because he said, he's not going to be invited in here again. But then I started hearing it was much, much more prolific in the entertainment industry than I ever knew or thought. Well, I'd never seen it, so I didn't even think such things were going on. And I didn't even hear whispers of it at the time. But again, you've got to understand, back then, such things were taboo. You never spoke about them. If they happened, they were covered up immediately. So it does go on, but I can tell you now, and this is me half guessing on it, but I do know that there are others, I do know, in the BBC that are of that mindset, and it's just that they haven't been discovered and they wait for them to be discovered. Have you ever heard of the BBC itself actually exposing one of these people? No, you haven't. They don't go looking for them, they don't care. Most organisations are like that. They won't expose or challenge wrongdoings in their own industry or their own organisation because they don't want the bad publicity that goes with that. But I can assure you, Hugh Edwards will not be the only one. I don't know how many there are, and I'm guessing when I say I think there's a hell of a lot more. There might not be a hell of a lot more, but there's more. I've heard the names of people that I know that in the BBC, they know what's going on. But we're paying our licence fee for this as well. Oh, but that's all I wanted to say. This is not a one-off, and people should be really hanging around the necks of the executives of the BBC to demand answers to this. Because this is only being exposed by outside sources, not internally, which should be happening.